You don't belong here. That's what she was told. Loudly, publicly, cruelly. Aisha Brooks, a soft-spoken black woman in simple clothes, sat quietly in business class. But her presence sparked whispers, then stares, then phones recording, as flight attendants and passengers turned against her. What they didn't know? She wasn't just any passenger, and by the time the truth came out, they weren't just embarrassed, they were exposed. Where are you watching from today? Have you ever seen someone judged just for how they look? Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and stay with us, because the twist in this story will leave you speechless. The San Francisco International Airport pulsed with life on a September morning, its vast terminals shrouded in a delicate fog that clung to the glass walls like a whispered secret. The air buzzed with the chaotic symphony of rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, and the crackle of overhead announcements. Travelers darted through the crowd, families hauling overstuffed bags, executives barking into phones, tourists clutching coffee cups with bleary eyes. Amid this restless tide, Aisha Brooks stepped off a shuttle bus, her presence a quiet counterpoint to the clamor. At 32, she was a vision of understated grace. Her simple white t-shirt and black slacks bore the faint creases of travel, her braided hair pulled back neatly, framing a face that held both warmth and resolve. Her deep brown eyes, sharp yet kind, scanned the terminal with purpose, missing nothing. A simple leather satchel hung from her shoulder, its worn surface cradling a laptop, a dog-eared journal, and a silver locket, a gift from her mother, its faint gleam a tether to her roots. Aisha was no ordinary traveler, though she moved through the world as if she were. As the CEO of Horizon Innovations, a renewable energy startup valued at $2 billion, she held a 45% stake in a company that had reshaped the industry with its bold vision. Her name had graced the pages of Forbes's 30 Under 30, her speeches on sustainable tech drawing standing ovations at global summits. Yet Aisha shunned the trappings of wealth. No designer handbags, no private jets. Just a woman who insisted on flying commercial to stay tethered to the pulse of the world she sought to change. Today's journey to New York was no leisure trip. It was a high-stakes mission to secure investors for Horizon's next phase, and her business class ticket for seat 3B was a rare concession to comfort, a chance to prepare in peace. She wove through the terminal, her steps measured but confident, the kind of stride that spoke of someone who knew her worth but didn't need to shout it. The silver locket glinted as she passed a newsstand, where headlines screamed of market surges and tech breakthroughs, some, unbeknownst to the casual reader, tied to her own work. Aisha's humility wasn't an act. It was a choice, forged in the crucible of her upbringing in Oakland, where her mother, a schoolteacher, had instilled in her a fierce belief in equity and resilience. "Power isn't in what you wear," her mother used to say. "It's in what you do." Those words echoed in Aisha's mind as she approached the check-in kiosk, her boarding pass printing with a soft whir. Horizon Air, Flight 319, Seat 3B. She tucked it into her satchel, her fingers brushing the journal where she'd scribbled notes for her investor pitch. At the security line, Aisha's quiet presence drew no fanfare, but it didn't go unnoticed. A businessman in a crisp suit glanced at her, his eyes lingering on her satchel, then flicking away with a faint smirk. A woman clutching a Louis Vuitton tote muttered to her companion, "Some people shouldn't bother with priority lanes." Aisha heard but didn't flinch, her face serene, her focus fixed on the path ahead. These were the first whispers of a prejudice she'd faced before, snap judgments based on her appearance, her blackness, her refusal to flaunt wealth. They were pinpricks, not wounds, but they hinted at a storm brewing, one she couldn't yet see. Clearing security, Aisha made her way to the gate, bypassing the sleek business-class lounge with its leather armchairs and clinking wine glasses. She preferred the open chaos of the terminal, where she could observe the world unfiltered. She settled onto a bench near Gate 42, pulling out her journal to review her notes. The faint scent of jet fuel drifted through the air, mingling with the hum of conversations. A young girl nearby struggled with a suitcase, and Aisha, without hesitation, rose to help, her smile disarming the girl's flustered mother. "Thank you," the woman said, her gratitude genuine. Aisha nodded, returning to her seat, unaware that a gate agent was watching, her eyes narrowing as she took in Aisha's modest attire. The gate agent, a young woman with a tight ponytail, clutched a scanner as she processed boarding passes. When Aisha approached, handing over her pass, the agent's smile was perfunctory, her gaze sweeping over Aisha's blouse and satchel. "One moment, please," she said, her fingers tapping the keyboard with unnecessary force. The screen flickered, and the agent's brow furrowed, though Aisha sensed it wasn't the system causing the pause. "Name?" the agent asked, her tone clipped. "Aisha Brooks," she replied, her voice steady, warm. The agent's eyes flicked up, then back to the screen, as if searching for a reason to doubt. "All right," she muttered, handing the pass back with reluctance. Aisha took it, her expression unchanged, but a faint unease settled in her chest. Nearby, a man in a tailored suit, his cufflinks glinting, leaned toward his companion. "Business class is getting too generous these days," he said, his voice low but deliberate, his glance at Aisha unmistakable. His companion chuckled, adjusting a Rolex. A woman in a silk scarf, her perfume sharp, added, "They'll let anyone in now." Their words hung in the air, sharp and unapologetic, the first threads of a web of bias weaving around Aisha. She didn't react, her gaze fixed on the jetway ahead, but the weight of their stares pressed against her, a silent challenge to her, right to exist in their space. Aisha boarded the plane, her boarding pass clutched lightly, her satchel slung over one shoulder. The jetway was a tunnel of anticipation, the hum of the aircraft a promise of escape. She stepped into the business class cabin, where plush seats and soft lighting awaited, a haven she'd earned but rarely claimed. As she moved toward seat 3B, the eyes of fellow passengers followed, some curious, others dismissive, a few openly hostile. A man in a pinstripe suit muttered under his breath, "Economy's that way." A woman with diamond earrings smirked, her phone already in hand, as if sensing a spectacle to come. Aisha slid her satchel under the seat, her movements deliberate, her poise unshaken. She opened her journal, the pages a map of her ambitions, and settled in, unaware of the gathering storm. The cabin was a powder keg, and Aisha, with her quiet power and unassuming grace, was the spark no one saw coming. The world might underestimate her, but Aisha Brooks was a force, and the skies were about to learn her name. The business-class cabin of Horizon Air Flight 319 was a sanctuary of privilege, its plush leather seats bathed in the soft glow of ambient lighting. The faint scent of lavender lingered, a curated promise of comfort for those deemed worthy. Aisha Brooks settled into seat 3B, her leather satchel tucked neatly beneath, her journal open to a page of meticulously handwritten notes. Her navy blouse, simple but crisp, caught the light as she adjusted her silver locket, a quiet anchor to her resolve. For a moment, the hum of the aircraft felt like a cocoon, shielding her from the world's noise. She traced a line in her journal, her mind already in New York, where investors awaited her vision for Horizon Innovations. But the calm was a fragile illusion, and the air was thick with an unspoken challenge, ready to ignite. Daniel Harper, the lead flight attendant, cut through the cabin like a blade. In his late 40s, with a starched uniform and cold blue eyes, he carried an air of authority laced with contempt. His badge gleamed, a symbol of control, but his gaze was a weapon, and it landed on Aisha with surgical precision. He stopped at her seat, his posture rigid, his voice a low, deliberate drawl. "Ma'am, this is business class. May I see your boarding pass?" The words were polite, but the tone was anything but. Each syllable dripped with skepticism, as if her presence were an affront to the cabin's sanctity. Aisha met his gaze, her brown eyes steady, unflinching. "Aisha Brooks, seat 3B, she said, her voice calm, measured as she handed over the pass. Daniel took it, his fingers brushing the paper with exaggerated care, as if it might be counterfeit. He studied it, his lips pursing into a thin line, his eyes flicking from the pass to her blouse, then to her satchel. The cabin grew quieter, passengers sensing a spectacle. A man in a pinstripe suit 2 rows ahead turned, his eyebrow raised. A woman with diamond earrings, Patricia Lang, leaned toward her seatmate, whispering, "She doesn't look the part." Daniel's scrutiny stretched into seconds, each one heavier than the last. "There's an issue," he said finally, his voice louder now, meant to carry. "Stay here." He strode to the galley, signaling 2 colleagues, Emily, a younger attendant with a forced smile, and Mark, a lanky man with a permanent scowl. They huddled, their whispers sharp enough to pierce the cabin's hum. "Does she look like business class to you?" Daniel asked, his voice low but not low enough. Emily glanced at Aisha, her eyes lingering on her braids, her plain attire. "Maybe a glitch," she muttered. Mark snorted. "Or she grabbed the wrong pass." The trio's glances burned, but Aisha remained composed, her fingers resting lightly on her journal. She'd faced this before, eyes that judged her skin, her style, her very existence in spaces deemed elite. But this was different. The cabin was a stage, and she was being cast as an intruder. Patricia Lang's voice rose, her silk scarf glinting as she spoke to her seatmate. "That blouse looks like it's from a thrift store. Who let her in?" Her words sparked a ripple of smirks, heads turning. A man in a Rolex seated across the aisle muttered, "They'll let anyone board these days." Daniel returned, his face a mask of false courtesy, the boarding pass held like evidence of a crime. "Ma'am, the system shows 3B as reserved. For a priority client," he said, his voice rising to ensure all could hear. "You're in economy, 28D. Move now, please." The words landed like a gavel, final and unyielding. Aisha's brow furrowed, her calm tested but unbroken. "I booked this seat," she said softly, her tone firm but polite. "Can you check again?" Daniel's eyes narrowed, a flash of irritation betraying his composure. "Don't cause a scene," he snapped, his voice now openly hostile. Emily stepped forward, her arms crossed, her smile gone. "Economy's fine for you," she said, her words laced with condescension. Mark loomed behind, adding, "Move, or we'll call security." The threat hung heavy, a public indictment. The cabin was a gallery of stares, some curious, some gleeful, all judging. A woman in a cashmere coat murmured, "Some people will try anything." A businessman chuckled. "What's next, backpackers in first class?" Aisha's fingers grazed her locket, a fleeting touchstone to her strength. She nodded, her face serene but her eyes fierce beneath the calm. "All right," she said, rising with deliberate grace, her satchel slung over one shoulder. The walk to economy was a gauntlet, each step a test of her dignity. Daniel led the way, his stride brisk, Emily and Mark flanking her like guards. Passengers watched, their whispers a chorus of contempt. Tried to sneak into business class. A teen, in row 15, snickered, his phone already out recording. "Look at her bag," another hissed. "No way she's legit." The economy cabin was a stark contrast. Cramped seats, stale air, the hum of discontent. Seat 28D was a lumpy cushion by a flickering overhead light. Aisha settled in, her journal clutched tightly, her poise unshaken but her heart heavy with the weight of their scorn. A man in a loud jacket, Tom Reed, leaned across the aisle. "Nice try, sweetheart," he said, his grin cruel. "Stick to your level." His wife, Karen, smirked, her phone poised to capture the moment. "This'll get likes," she said, typing furiously. The jetway doors closed, sealing Aisha in a cabin of strangers who'd already judged her guilty. The plane taxied, its engines roaring, but the real turbulence was in the air around her, a storm of prejudice, ready to erupt. Aisha opened her journal, her pen steady, but the tension was palpable. She was no longer just a passenger. She was a symbol, and the skies were about to test her resolve. The economy cabin of Horizon Air Flight 319 was a crucible of discomfort. Its narrow seats and stale air, a stark contrast to the opulence Aisha Brooks had left behind. Seat 28D, a lumpy cushion under a flickering light, was her new reality. A punishment for daring to claim a space not meant for her kind. At least, not in their eyes. Aisha sat with her leather satchel at her feet, her navy blouse still crisp despite the ordeal, her silver locket glinting faintly as she opened her journal. Her braided hair framed a face of serene resolve, but the air around her crackled with hostility, a storm of prejudice gathering strength. The plane had barely leveled off, yet the cabin felt like a coliseum, and Aisha, with her quiet dignity, was the unwilling gladiator. The taunts began as whispers but grew bolder, fueled by the audacity of her presence. Tom Reed, a man in a garish jacket across the aisle, leaned over, his grin ablade. "Nice try, sweetheart," he said, his voice loud enough to draw eyes. "Thought you could play VIP with that thrift store look?" His wife, Karen, smirked, her phone already out, the camera's red light blinking like a predator's eye. "This is gold," she murmured, narrating to an invisible audience. "So this woman tried to sneak into business class. Look at her now." Her words, sharp and gleeful, sparked a ripple of laughter, passengers craning their necks to gawk. The flight attendants, emboldened by their earlier victory, fanned the flames. Daniel Harper, the ringleader, strode through economy, his badge gleaming like a sheriff's star. His cold blue eyes locked onto Aisha as he passed, his voice carrying to his colleague Emily. "She's the one who caused the fuss up front," he said, loud enough for Rose to hear. "Thinks she's special." Emily, her forced smile now a sneer, nodded, tossing a glance at Aisha's satchel. "Probably faked her ticket," she muttered, handing a drink to a passenger who chuckled. Mark, the lanky attendant, pushed a cart nearby, his scowl deepening. "Should have stayed home, budget girl," he quipped, winking at Tom. The cabin became a stage, and Aisha, its reluctant star, a woman in yoga pants 2 rows ahead, nudged her friend. "No class, no cash," she scoffed, her phone angled to capture Aisha's calm face. A teen with earbuds dangling tweeted furiously, his screen glowing. "Lady and coach got owned, tried to play rich, LOL." The post spread like wildfire, racking up likes and retweets, each notification a tiny cut in the digital ether. Karen's video, now live on X, drew thousands of views, her caption searing, "Business class fail. Know your lane." Comments piled on, some cruel, some curious, all feeding the spectacle. Aisha's fingers rested on her journal, her pen unmoving, but her eyes caught the light, fierce beneath their calm. She heard every word, felt every stare, yet her poise remained a fortress. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "They'll try to break you, but your strength is in your silence." That strength, honed in the face of countless slights, held her steady now. She sipped from her water bottle, her movements deliberate, a quiet defiance against the mob's scorn. The crew's disdain grew overt. During meal service, Daniel strutted through, his tray of business-class menus bypassing Aisha's row. "Nothing for her," he said to Emily, his voice a public verdict. "She's lucky to be on board." A man in a loud tie muttered, "Should have walked to New York." Emily, serving drinks, skipped Aisha's row with a shrug. "Oops, ran out," she said, her sarcasm drawing snickers. Mark tossed a blanket that landed half on Aisha's lap. "Don't say we didn't hook you up," he quipped, his wink a mockery. The passengers lapped it up, their laughter a chorus of complicity. A college kid nearby, his phone glowing, leaned over. "Hey, you scam tickets often?" His tone was playful but cruel, his camera rolling. Aisha met his gaze, her voice soft but unwavering. "I'm just traveling. Like you." He scoffed, posting another tweet. "Fake rich lady still acting cool. Iconic." Karen zoomed in, whispering to Tom, "This is viral gold. Budget Barbie strikes out." The cabin felt like a pressure cooker, each jab tightening the screws. On Aisha's composure. The role of social media was undeniable, amplifying the cruelty into a global spectacle. X buzzed with hashtags. Horizon fail, you know your place. Each post a brick in the wall of public shaming. A woman in a floral dress. Ellen overheard the commotion and laughed. "She's probably writing a sob story for her blog," she said, sparking more chuckles. The crowd's judgment was a mirror of societal norms, where appearance and skin color dictated worth, and Aisha, with her modest blouse and blackness, was deemed unworthy. Yet Aisha remained an enigma, her silence a shield. She turned a page. In her journal, her hands steady, her heart a quiet furnace of resolve. The cabin's hostility was 1,000 tiny cuts, but she refused to bleed. Her strength wasn't in confrontation, but in endurance, a power the mob couldn't fathom. The plane droned on, the tension a living thing, coiling tighter with every passing minute. Aisha was no longer just a passenger. She was a challenge to their world, and the skies were about to feel her weight. The Horizon Air headquarters in New York stood like a monolith of glass and steel, its sleek lines piercing the Manhattan skyline as dusk painted the city in hues of amber and gray. Inside, the boardroom was a cauldron of tension, its polished, mahogany table reflecting the stern faces of executives, shareholders, and a PR team tapping tablets with nervous urgency. Daniel Harper, Emily, and Mark sat near the front, their uniforms crisp, their postures smug. Daniel whispered to Emily, "Probably a bonus for handling that troublemaker." Mark nodded, his scowl softened by anticipation. They'd been flown, in overnight, told it was urgent, and they expected praise for protecting the airline's elite image. The room buzzed with quiet confidence, but a storm was brewing, and its name was Aisha Brooks. The heavy oak doors swung open, and Michael Langston, Horizon Air's chairman, entered, his presence a gravitational force. At 55, he was a titan of the industry, his silver hair and piercing eyes commanding silence. Behind him walked Aisha, her navy blouse and black slacks unchanged from the flight, her leather satchel gone, replaced by a single folder clutched in her hand. Her silver locket caught the light, a quiet beacon of her resolve. The trio froze, their smugness evaporating as recognition dawned. Daniel's hands twitched, Emily's smile faltered, and Mark's jaw clenched, his eyes darting for an exit. That wasn't there. Michael took the head of the table, Aisha beside him, her posture erect but unassuming. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice low, steely, cutting through the room's hum. "Yesterday on Flight 319, a passenger was humiliated. You removed her from business class, questioned her right to be there, and mocked her before an entire cabin." His words were a blade, precise and unrelenting. He clicked a remote and a screen flickered to life, playing Karen's viral video. Every sneer, every taunt. Daniel's "you don't belong here." Emily's "probably faked her ticket." The passenger's laughter rang out crystal clear. The room fell silent, the attendants' faces paling, their earlier bravado reduced to ash. Michael leaned forward, his eyes boring into the trio. "The woman you shamed is Aisha Brooks," he said, pausing to let the name land. "CEO of Horizon Innovations, a key investor in this airline, and my personal appointee to our advisory board." Gasps rippled through the room, a collective intake of breath. Daniel's hands trembled, beads of sweat dotting his brow. Emily stared at the floor, her fingers twisting her badge. Mark's scowl vanished, replaced by a look of trapped desperation. Aisha remained still, her brown eyes sweeping the room, calm but piercing, a silent force that needed no flourish. She rose, her voice soft but resonant, each word a stone in a still pond. "I'm not here for revenge," she said, sliding her folder across the table. "This report documents 19 incidents of racial and class-based bias on Horizon Air flights, passengers judged by their skin, their clothes, their accents. I was one. Others weren't so lucky." She paused, her gaze locking onto Daniel, then Emily, then Mark. "This isn't about me. It's about a system that lets this happen, that emboldens cruelty under the guise of protocol." The board leaned in, some nodding, others scribbling, notes, the weight of her words sinking deep. Aisha opened the folder, revealing charts, testimonies, and data, each page a testament to her meticulous resolve. A grandmother in economy mocked for her accent. A student denied service for his hoodie. These are not isolated errors. They're patterns. Her voice grew firmer, not louder, its clarity cutting through the room's tension. "I'm asking for justice, not for me, but for those without my platform." The PR head, Lisa Chen, scribbled furiously, her eyes wide with realization. An executive murmured, "This could redefine us." Daniel tried to speak, his voice hoarse. "We thought she didn't look—" Michael cut him off, his tone ice. "You thought wrong, and you acted worse." He turned to the board, his jaw set. "We decide now. Protect profit or rebuild trust." A vote was called, hands rising. In unanimous resolve, Lisa Chen proposed a plan. "We retrain, reform, rebuild." Aisha nodded, adding, "Start with accountability." The trio's fates were sealed, not with firings but with lessons carved in humility. Daniel was reassigned to the customer complaint desk, facing a barrage of angry callers. Emily would serve a month in economy, no shortcuts, her charm tested by crowded rows. Mark was sent to baggage claim, hauling bags in the rain, his arrogance drenched. All three faced mandatory training under Aisha's new Equity in the Skies charter, a blueprint drawn from her report, its every line a rebuke. To their actions, the board approved a global campaign, Respect in Flight, to retrain staff, redesign policies, and ensure no passenger felt less than human. Aisha stood, her locket glinting, her folder closed. She'd turned her pain into a clarion call, her ordeal into a movement. The room watched her, some in awe, others in shame, but all knew the skies would never be the same. The boardroom doors closed behind her, but her vision was just opening, a beacon for a world where dignity wasn't a privilege but a right. Aisha Brooks had spoken, and the airline, indeed the industry, would bend to her truth. The echoes of Aisha Brooks' stand in the Horizon Air boardroom reverberated far beyond its glass walls, a seismic shift that rippled through the airline and the world beyond. In the weeks following that fateful confrontation, the skies themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the fallout to settle. For Daniel Harper, Emily, and Mark, the architects of Aisha's humiliation, the consequences were as swift as they were humbling, their once smug certainty reduced to a lesson written in sweat and shame. For Aisha, it was a moment of quiet vindication, her pain transmuted into a force that would reshape an industry. The world watched, and the narrative of a black woman in a simple blouse began to rewrite the rules of the skies. Daniel Harper, stripped of his business-class swagger, now sat at the customer complaint desk in a sterile office at Horizon Air's New York hub. His badge, once a symbol of authority, hung heavy, a mark of disgrace. The phone rang incessantly, each call a barrage of fury from passengers who'd seen Karen's viral video, now etched in the public's memory. "You shamed that woman," a caller roared, quoting Aisha's story, her name a beacon of justice. Daniel's responses, stammered apologies, wrote scripts, fell flat, his voice hoarse from hours of reckoning. Colleagues avoided his gaze, their whispers a constant reminder of his fall. At night, he scrolled X where Your Horizon fail still lingered, his name trending alongside classist crew. His arrogance, once a shield, had crumbled, each call a chisel carving humility into his core. Emily's lesson was no less grueling. Reassigned to economy, she navigated crowded rows under the weight of passengers' glares. Her charm, once a tool to curry favor in business class, was useless here. A mother in row 29, clutching a toddler, refused her tray, her voice sharp. "You're the one who mocked her." Emily's smile faltered, her hands trembling as she moved on. Passengers who'd seen the video whispered her name, their phones, capturing her every misstep. On X, her old tweets, boasts of elite service were unearthed, ridiculed under hashtags that stung like salt in a wound. Aisha's Equity in the Skies charter, now mandatory reading, loomed over her, each rule a rebuke to her past. The rows she served were her crucible, forging a new awareness with every ignored nod. Mark, drenched in the cold rain of Chicago's baggage claim, hauled suitcases with a scowl that no longer held power. His lanky frame ached under the weight, his uniform sodden, his smirks drowned in toil. Passengers passing by recognized him, their murmurs a chorus of disdain. That's the guy from the video. His public posts, once flippant jabs at entitled travelers, were now fodder for online scorn, his name a cautionary tale. The charter's principles, respect, equity, were his daily penance, recited in training sessions that stripped away his bravado. The rain washed over him, but it couldn't cleanse the lesson. His cruelty had cost him respect, and the bags he carried were lighter than the shame he bore. Beyond the trio, Aisha's vision took flight. On X, the tide had turned. The horizon fail, once a weapon of mockery, faded under the rising chorus of respect in flight. Passengers shared stories of kinder flights. A grandmother offered a warm meal, a student treated with dignity despite his worn shoes. The hashtag trended, a digital monument to Aisha's resolve. Media outlets pounced, their headlines a crescendo of praise. Forbes, Aisha Brooks redefines airline equity. CNN, CEOs stand against bias soars. Karen's video, once a tool of humiliation, backfired. Her account deleted amid a storm of backlash. Tom's weak apology, posted in haste, was buried under a tide of support for Aisha, the quiet warrior who'd turned scorn into a movement. The Equity in the Skies charter became Horizon Air's heartbeat, its principles woven into every training manual, every flight. Staff learned to see beyond appearances, to treat accents and hoodies as badges of humanity, not inferiority. Across the industry, whispers of Aisha's report, 19 incidents of bias meticulously documented, sparked change, with rival airlines eyeing similar reforms. In boardrooms and break rooms, her name was spoken with reverence, a reminder that one woman's stand could shift an entire system. The skies, once a stage for prejudice, were becoming a canvas for justice, each flight a testament to her legacy. In her New York hotel, Aisha sat by a window overlooking the city's glittering expanse. Her navy blouse was folded neatly, her silver locket resting on the table, its faint glow a tether to her mother's wisdom. Power is in what you do. She opened her journal, its pages a map of her journey, from a cramped seat in economy to a boardroom that bowed to her truth. A new boarding pass lay beside it, seat 3B, for a flight to Chicago. Aisha's fingers traced the paper, her heart steady, her eyes alight with purpose. She wasn't done fighting, but this next flight would be different. A chance to see her, vision in motion, to walk among the skies she'd reshaped. The city hummed below, its rhythm a mirror of her resolve. Aisha closed her journal, her locket glinting as she rose. The world had underestimated her, but she'd turned their cruelty into a clarion call. Tomorrow she'd board again, not as a victim but as a catalyst, ready to witness the fruits of her labor. The skies awaited, and Aisha Brooks was ready to soar. The December air at LaGuardia Airport was sharp with winter's bite, but the sky stretched wide, a boundless blue that seemed to hum with possibility. Aisha Brooks stepped from a shuttle bus, her navy blouse catching the breeze, her black slacks as unassuming as ever. The silver locket at her throat glinted softly, a quiet tether to her mother's wisdom, while her worn leather satchel hung from her shoulder, cradling her journal and a boarding pass for seat 3B. 3 months had passed since her stand at Horizon Air's headquarters, a moment that had reshaped an industry and etched her name into the annals of justice. Today's flight to Chicago was no mere journey. It was a pilgrimage, a chance to walk the skies she'd fought to make equitable, to see her vision reflected in the faces of strangers. Aisha moved through the terminal, her brown eyes warm but resolute, her stride a blend of grace and purpose. The holiday bustle swirled around her, families juggling gift bags, travelers clutching coffee, a child's laughter piercing the din. As CEO of Horizon Innovations, her empire had grown, but her heart remained anchored to the ordinary, to those who boarded planes with dreams, not privilege. This flight was a deliberate echo of her ordeal, a test of the Equity in the Skies charter she'd forged from pain. She bypassed the gleaming business-class lounge, choosing instead the raw pulse of the gate, where life unfolded unfiltered. At gate 19, a young agent named Jamal greeted her, his smile as open as the sky. "Welcome, Ms. Brooks," he said, scanning her pass with care, his eyes free of the judgment she'd once endured. Aisha nodded, her lips curving faintly, a spark of hope igniting in her chest. The jetway stretched before her, no longer a gauntlet, but a bridge to a new era. She stepped aboard Horizon Air's business-class cabin, where plush seats and soft lighting welcomed all, the air cleansed of its old venom. Aisha settled into 3B, her satchel tucked beneath, her journal open to a blank page, its edges worn from months of dreaming. Across the aisle, a young black man in a faded hoodie sat, his worn backpack clutched tightly, his eyes darting with the unease of someone expecting dismissal. Aisha watched, her heart a quiet drum, as Emily approached. Her uniform creased, her once sneering demeanor softened by lessons hard learned. "Sir, would you like a pillow?" Emily asked, her voice gentle, her hands offering a blanket with dung hair. The man blinked, his shoulders easing, a hesitant smile breaking through. "Thanks," he murmured, accepting the blanket as if it were a gift of trust. Aisha's breath caught, her fingers grazing her locket. This was her fight, not for herself, but for every soul once deemed unworthy. The cabin filled and the crew moved with a grace born of reform. Emily served with quiet diligence, her every gesture a nod to the charter's mandate, respect beyond appearance. A woman in economy, her accent thick with her native Spanish, received a warm meal, her gratitude met with a kind word. A student, in a patched jacket, was handed a headset, no questions asked, his shy nod a testament to dignity restored. The absence of Daniel and Mark, still paying their dues elsewhere, hung like a silent victory, their shadows replaced by a crew that saw humanity first. Aisha's journal lay open, but her pen rested, her eyes drinking in the scene, each moment a brushstroke on the canvas she'd painted. The plane climbed, its engines a steady hymn, but the true music was in the cabin, a symphony of equity, of voices no longer silenced. Aisha gazed out the window where clouds parted to reveal a horizon vast and unbroken. Her mother's words echoed, a mantra carved in her soul. Power isn't in what you wear, it's in what you do. She'd done the impossible, turning a single flight's cruelty into a movement that lifted all. The locket at her throat felt warm, a reminder of the woman who'd taught her to stand tall, to fight not with anger but with purpose. As the flight neared Chicago, a child's giggle from economy floated forward, a sound untouched by the old hierarchies. Aisha closed her journal, its blank page no longer empty but alive with hope. She wasn't just a passenger, she was a beacon, a black woman in a simple blouse who'd proven that equality was no gift. It was a right, won through quiet strength. The plane descended, the city's lights twinkling like stars, and Aisha felt a certainty deep in her bones. Her work would continue, but this moment was a triumph, a sky where no one flew beneath another. The cabin erupted in applause as the wheels touched down, a spontaneous ode to a flight transformed. Aisha rose, her satchel slung over her shoulder, her stride unbroken. The young man in the hoodie stood taller, his backpack no longer a burden but a badge of belonging. As she stepped into the jetway, Emily's voice followed, soft but sincere. "Thank you, Ms. Brooks, for the lesson." Aisha turned, her smile soft, not smug, and nodded. The horizon stretched endless before her, and Aisha Brooks walked toward it, her heart full, her legacy soaring. Sometimes the quietest voices, a woman who refused to shrink, carry the loudest revolutions, rewriting the skies for all.